Okay, I'm ready to chat with Shawn Baker, the carnivore man, because we are often, most of us, endurance athletes training a lot and doing more damage to our muscles and building it up. And I'm all about performance and longevity. Shawn, thanks for coming on my show to talk to us, triathlete, endurance athletes, people that often do too much in life and actually cause more damage than good with their workouts. So I'm trying to create more awareness of how this chronic cardio is not ideal and how nutrition would be a good way to look at what to eat, how to eat, when, why, all that with their exercise. So thanks for sharing your wisdom today on the carnivore diet, because you are the master, the founder pretty much of this world.
Well,
So
thank you for having me on. Yeah, those are interesting topics, and I think there's some probably some uh, universal things we can talk about that affect just about anybody, whether it's being a better athlete or just being a healthier person. The longevity stuff, I don't know. I mean, no one really knows. I mean, I know there's people that claim that you're going to live longer if you do it this way, but to my knowledge, no one's putting up results yet. I don't see 120-year-olds walking around in good health. I just haven't seen that yet. So I'm kind of a little I'm a little hesitant to make any longevity claims. What I will say is, I think quality of life, I think, is super important, and I do think that the same things that provide us a good quality of life, that is, absence from disease, absence from discomfort, pain, good function, you know, and muscle has a big role in that, are probably going to result in certainly a better quality of life, a longer functional health span, and very likely a longer lifespan. But I can't, no one can make any guarantees on that stuff yet.
yeah, I think it's just really important for me to share this information with our listeners. We started 10 years ago talking about, eat more fat to burn fat, and, talking to people that are listening are doing a lot of cardio and long distance running and cycling and triathlons. And as fast forward to today, a lot of people are talking about prioritized protein, as myself, and talking about carnivore. But it's confusing. How do we define carnivore first, and then we'll get into a great conversation, I think, of how does this work for someone that's exercising and burning fat, and some higher intensity exercise if you're burning muscle glycogen up. So why don't you just start with kind of basic overview of your why? Why are you so passionate, and you're so amazing out there speaking and sharing this knowledge? What's your why, your purpose, passion, and mission?
Well, I mean, I'm a physician, and so the reason I went to medical school, what I want to do is because I wanted to hopefully get people healthier. I mean, I think that's all why most of us do that. And so, I went the route as a surgeon, and certainly I improved some quality of life in some people. But I felt like at the end of the day, there were better things I could do with my time, I suppose. And I argue that I think I'm making a bigger effect now than I could as a surgeon. So, I mean, that's, and I mean, literally every single day, without exception, I get people telling me that their health has done a 180. They've dramatically changed their life. Anything from, severe depression to, crippling pain, chronic disease, chronic pain, digestive issues, skin issues, on and on and on. So we see that all the time. So that's very motivating to me. I want to just, because you mentioned how do we define a carnivore diet? I mean, the strict definition is you're just eating animal products. I mean, that's it. Anybody says, can I have honey? Can I have tea? And I mean, no, the answer is no, you can't. But I mean, that doesn't mean, if you want to meet the strict definition of what a carnivorous diet might be, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what you should do. And I try to tell people that, because they're asking me, how much can I eat? Can I have some grapes? And I said, I don't know, maybe you can. It's not, it's not a religion. It's very different from like a vegan ideology where it's very dogma and ideologically driven. This is ultimately, let's do what works for people. Let's get them healthy. My view is that animal products are a superior form of nutrition. They are very, very nutrient dense. I know that's kind of an overused term right now, but I think it's appropriate. It is something that humans have eaten since we've been humans. And I don't know, if you believe in an evolutionary model that goes back some roughly 3 million years, and we've been eating meat even before we were humans, when we were still Australopithecines. And so that is part of what we are. That's what we are as a species. We're well designed for it. Meat is so efficiently and wonderfully absorbed and digested by our digestive tract, particularly when we're healthy. Now, when we're not healthy and we've got a messed up gut, sometimes it's a problem. A lot of people can't produce stomach acid anymore because of chronically exposure to the wrong diet or drugs and things like that. I know I'm getting ahead of myself and off topic, but anyway, yes. So let's go ahead.
Well, it all ties together, right? That's why I'm struggling trying to just start with one topic because it's just leads me down so many rabbit holes. But so who is it best for? You talk about a lot of people healing, and when I hear about gut issues, skin issues, all sorts of things to switch to a strict meat diet. And then how long is it all the time? I think sustainability is the word that just came to mind. It's like, well, my husband likes to cook. We like real food, but just eating all meat just seems kind of boring all the time.
Well,
So
I
what
mean,
does it do?
on its outset, it does seem boring. I'm not bored. That's what I do. I mean, and but everybody has their own sort of craziness, I suppose. And if we look at, because we have so many choices these days, I mean, you can go to the grocery store and literally there's 10,000 products you can choose from. That wasn't always the case throughout history. Even as far as maybe a couple hundred years ago, you probably would have dined from 10 or 15 different products that you had locally, and most days it would be probably the same thing. So this is a new phenomenon, all this variety that we have. And then certainly, depending on where you were geographically, if you lived in the freezing cold area, you're pretty much going to be eating meat most of the time. So I don't think that's unusual given the scope of humanity. But as far as who is it most beneficial for, I think people are really sick. I think people that are really suffering and have problems are probably ones going to stand to make the most gains from this. Now, if you're relatively healthy and you're like, I don't have any issues, maybe I got a couple pounds to lose, there's a lot of ways you can do that. You don't necessarily need to do a carnivore diet to do that. I think it's very effective, and there's some significant advantages to that. And I think, like you said, a lot of people will do this, and I'll flat out tell them, hey, do it for 3 months, do it for 6 months, fix your problems, and then see what you can branch out to. I think that's a very, sustainable, because I don't necessarily believe that fruits and vegetables and even, some of the grains or starches are all inherently bad for every single person. Now, there's a lot of people that messes them up, and probably more than we think or willing to admit. And, I think you need to identify those things. And I think those things are also variable over time. There's some people, I cannot tell you how many people who, had like an egg intolerance, and then they do a diet where they kind of let things recover, and then suddenly they're able to eat them again. And so, I think it varies. I encourage people to experiment. I don't, like I said, I think going carnivore or strict carnivore for a period of time makes a lot of sense for a lot of people. Some people, depending upon, depending on what statistic you read and what population you read, food addiction affects 10% of us, and, probably more so in the obese population, the diabetic population. And so those people struggle without abstinence. Moderation doesn't work for those people. You can't moderate something which you can't tell someone to moderate something which they can't moderate. And so you have to say, well, we need to be fairly strict with that, and that changes things a lot for people. So, but I mean, yeah, uniquely, autoimmune diseases are very, very well, seem to be well addressed by this. Certain gut disorders, Crohn's and IBS, and ulcerative colitis, two of which are autoimmune anyway, but those things seem to work really well. Psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, eczema, rosacea, some of the mental health issues, they really seem to help. So those things are, I think, the most powerful nutritional tool we have. Now, there's other things, exercising. We can talk about good exercise versus maybe stuff that's counterproductive, but exercise, sleep, sun, circadian, sort of alignment, sun exposure, all those things. I know you're sitting in front of a nice sunny window here. I've got a window behind me that doesn't work for what we're doing with the studio, but I'm standing at least. So
I was standing, but now I'm sitting. But
yeah.
I think the lifestyle factors are huge. I always, I call it the holistic method, where I have 8 elements that coach people on to really be fit and healthy from the inside out. But how important it is to work on, how we eat food, chewing your food slowly. And I think, like you're saying, digestion issues is a big part of when people start a carnivore diet, being able to start just sitting, take a few breaths, relax, chew your food, eat slowly, mindfully. But do you still find people have a hard time consuming a lot more of animal-based diet when they start?
So many people really struggle to eat enough food on a carnivore diet.
Because you're so full and digesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, protein tends to be a very satiating macronutrient. It is something that, a lot of people, to tell somebody to go down and sit down and eat a 1-pound steak, a lot of people can't do that. Now, I can do that as a snack. I mean, I've been doing this forever, and I've got a pretty big appetite. But most people, not all people, there's people that can overeat, and there's people that get fat on a carnivore diet. But that that tends to be few and far between. Most people will find that they pretty, I wouldn't say effortlessly, but they have a very easy time losing weight with this, just because of the satiety factor. You know, calories have a role. You know, calories matter. Eating too many calories will make you obese. Not eating enough will make you lose weight, maybe to the point of skinny. And then there's also, what kind of weight are you losing? Are we losing lean mass? Are we losing fat? Are we losing a combination of the above? Are we losing mostly fat and a little bit of lean mass, hopefully? And so, yeah, I mean, it is a different way of eating. Most people will find that their requirements for meal frequency go down. Most people end up over time, about 90% of the people I think eat about twice a day on this. You know, that seems to be a common pattern for people. So you have to get used to that. But yeah, there's definitely people that struggle to eat enough. It's probably more so than overeating.
So I call it more intuitive fasting when I started eating more meat, especially after a couple of years. It was 2019 when I was with Stephanie Holbrook and all these other people on the low carb cruise and KetoCon. And I was not a big animal meat eater and got converted and gradually started eating that. And I know I feel satiated and full. And I completely feel different eating more protein, but it does take me longer to digest and break down. And you end up not being hungry, and it's intuitive fasting or unintentional fasting is what I mean. It just happens to fast. But I guess that goes into one of my other questions is, fasting and carnivores, this kind of happens. Do you have a set time, and then how to get enough protein in the macros when you are so full eating a steak or 2 grass-fed burgers or whatever you're eating? How do you get, what's your suggestions on carnivore macros and fasting?
Yeah, well, like I said, I think for most human beings, eating what I would call a species appropriate diet will lead to a natural, relatively low meal frequency. Right now, we have such an unnatural diet for our species, and so we're eating constantly. Most people eat from the minute they wake up at 7 a.m. until they go to bed at 10 p.m. So they're eating for 15 hours a day, solid straight throughout the day, and that is not, I don't think, what we're designed to do. I think for most people, when you go on a sort of a meat-heavy diet, yes, you kind of intuitively fast. You naturally come into this pattern, and I don't sit there and say, it's not yet 10:30. I can't eat my first meal yet. I'm not doing that. I'm kind of, some of it has to do with my day, what the schedule's like. Some days I can eat earlier than others. I don't really get too concerned about that. But generally, I'll eat twice a day, and usually there'll be a period of between 12 and 18 hours between my dinner and my breakfast. Typically, that's what happens to me. But I think that as far as timing it, some people do better with structure. Like we see about these 8-hour eating windows, 6-hour eating windows, 4-hour eating windows. I think for some people that have a hard time with satiety, and maybe they don't really eat, a lot of people eat out of boredom or comfort or stress or whatever, or just for social pressure reasons. For those people, having a schedule can be helpful, particularly people that are struggling with obesity and they're just so used to just fixing the problem with some kind of dopamine induced hit from some kind of food that's probably not good for you. Those people probably benefit from that. And if anything, it just decreases the amount of time they're exposed to these unhealthy foods. But I don't initially tell people to fast or worry about it. I think, once you start switching over to a more meat intense diet, those things kind of naturally take care of itself. And I think that's how we're designed. I mean, there's no animal on the planet that's looking at a stopwatch or using an app or, looking at a menu. I mean, they just eat what they're designed to eat, and they do fine, and they're not overweight, and they generally are free of chronic disease, and they, most of the time they get eaten or they get injured. I mean, unfortunately. And fortunately now with us, we're pretty, as humans, we've kind of taken most of the danger out of our life. Some of us kind of sort of do stupid things to reintroduce that. But I mean, for the most part, we've got it pretty good as a species.
So I know people, and I hear our athletes in our group pages say, I got to be in nutritional ketosis. I don't want to, get out of ketosis when I'm exercising or during the day. How does carnivore relate to people wanting to get those ketones? I mean, nutritional ketosis, is it?
Yeah, I mean, you certainly
Same.
can. I mean, you can be in ketosis literally on any diet. It just has to do
Yeah.
with meal frequency and exercise and that type of stuff. But some things facilitate that. Obviously, the lower your carbs are, the easier it is to go into ketosis. And so carnivore, you can certainly tailor it to do that. I don't necessarily make that the goal. I don't, like I said, my goal is not to, unless, maybe I'm treating some sort of advanced cancer or epilepsy, then I'm more concerned about, what my ketone levels are. But for the most part, I mean, you keep the goal the goal. If your goal is to be lean or to lose weight or maybe to fix some particular issue, the ketones are maybe have something to do it, but it's not the overall picture. And so if you sort of hyper focus on ketones, oh my God, I got to start eating a bunch of butter or something like that, then to maintain ketones, you may be just, sort of sabotaging yourself. So I don't get too hung up on that. And the other thing is, particularly with athletes, we know that as you get more efficient at utilizing ketones, and you do, they're not as high. They just chronically run lower because you produce them, but you use them right away. And that's what you want. You want to have an efficient transfer of energy from production to utilization. So if you're sitting around with all this unutilizable energy and you're excreting it in urine, that might be some calories you lose, but it's not very efficient for a functioning person. So you don't want to sit there and have a bunch of energy in your blood. You see what I'm saying? You don't want to no one would say, oh, I want super high blood glucose, right? So why would you want super high ketones necessarily, if your goal is, unless you're, like I said, if your goal is to, there is a relationship between ketones and blood glucose, and usually you don't see ketones with high blood glucose. And so there's a shift in that thing. And maybe you would argue that, ketones should be higher than they are. But even, the work through like Verta Health, who's done a lot of work on diabetes reversal in their clinics, they started discovering what the definition of nutritional ketosis as per Jeff Volek, Steve Finney was 0.5 millimolar. And they started seeing all their patients are now 0.3, 0.4, 0.2. And they said, well, maybe we need to dial that back a little bit, as to what we want to consider helpful. So, and again, depending on who your population is, sounds like it's just athletes. The other thing I would mention about the athletic population, particularly the endurance athlete, you may be aware there was a paper came out, I think about it's been a year and a half now, looking at low carb athletes and their protein requirements, and it is up. It is up beyond what a normal athlete on a higher carb diet would be. So that's something to keep in mind. And so I'm a pretty big advocate of protein. I think I value lean tissue, and I think it's helpful for just a number of things, not only just function, but like I said, resistance to disease. So you're going to have to go on the higher side, I think, as an athlete.
Yeah, I think I was laughed last few years when, keto started being popular, and now it's, people keep talking about more carnivore. And then I think everyone goes to, oh, I'm only supposed to eat fat and whatever fat, all fat. And then they forgot about protein. Now it's all right. Oh no, wait, I need to have protein. And people just are back and forth. They don't really understand how to eat, why we need to eat and when to eat and all of that. And I think it's just interesting to watch this nutrition world go back and forth. I guess start with paleo and just all these words, but really we want to eat food. I would say nutritional therapy, we're taught eat food that balances your blood sugar, gives you energy, satiety, fullness, and lasts for hours, and then not have the inflammatory foods. And when you take out the oxalates, lectins, FODMAPs, I'm like, well, what's left to eat is just meat. So I understand the whole carnivore process. When you look at what foods people can't eat, when I do their lab testing and look at their health and symptoms that they have, it really comes down to just eliminate all those inflammatory foods. So you're left with a carnivore diet.
Yeah, meat is a pretty safe food, particularly red meat. And I know there's a lot of bashing around red meat, but it truly is. It tends to be very low inflammatory. It tends to meet all those criteria that you listed off. And it's, again, it's an incredibly nutrient-packed powerhouse of food. I think if there's anything that's a superfood out there, I think red meat is it, beef, lamb, and things like that. Interestingly, somebody has sent me, there was a look at the Google trends for search diets for the last 5 years. And what you can see is the ketogenic diet has taken off as the number one diet. It used to be Weight Watchers about 5 years ago, and the ketogenic diet has taken the number one spot. And then it's starting at that was like 2016. And then 2018, the carnivore diet started to pop into that thing. And now it's just blown by vegan diet and blown by all these other diets, DASH, Mediterranean. And now it's sitting there like just even with the quote unquote plant-based diet. So we're starting to get more and more people realizing that, maybe there's something here to animal products and plants may not be it, because obviously you see a huge kind of really corporate back push to go plant-based. And really, I think that's grounded in the fact that their eyes are seeing all these dollar signs, that they can make all this really cheap, hyper processed food and pretend it's good for the environment and pretend it's better for our health. And, and it doesn't have that evil saturated fat and cholesterol, which is so evil, then they can make all this money on this stuff. And it's really a disservice to people.
I just heard that, but my client was telling me about Bill Gates was behind one of those that we
Well, I
shouldn't
mean,
eat animal meat and it's
yeah,
not
I mean,
sustainable.
he's invested in about everything. So, I mean,
Yeah.
one of the things is he's talking about, all Western developed world should go on a 100% synthetic meat diet, which is just insane.
Yeah.
No one wants to do that. And the only way they would be able to do that is to legislate it and force it and make raising animals illegal. And there's some people that would do that or willing to do that. So I think we have to, as a community, collectively push back as strongly as possible to do whatever it takes to prevent that from happening. Because I think we have such a problem already in society with so many people sick from eating all this processed garbage, and to sort of shift further in that direction is just maddening. It makes no sense at all.
So I know, speaking of, grass-fed meat, good quality meat, do you have a preference? Like just eat whatever meat you can get? I know some
Yeah.
people that carnivore, they would say, just go to Wendy's. I've listened to Dr. Ken Berry and Eric Westman, and
Yep.
they would just rather people go get meat than eat the French fries.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same category with that regard. I mean, I think, yes, if that's what you can afford, that's what you should do. It's still going to give you a tremendous benefit. In fact, the data I've got on 12,000 people shows the exact same thing. The study from Harvard University on the carnivore diet basically showed the same thing. It's just, it doesn't matter for as far as disease reversal and getting off medications and symptomatic relief. Now, I will say there's some caveats to that. I think that, and not just grass-based meat, I think there's an environmental potential bonus when you eat meat that's been raised regeneratively, and that's a subcategory of grass-based. A lot of the grass-based or grass-finished animals are actually, potentially more damaging to the environment the way they're raised, because they just go out there and they chew the grass down to bare dirt, and it ends up with this desertification where they just kind of kill everything. Whereas if they manage it well and they rotate them, on a every other day or daily basis, then that's a big difference. So you need to talk about the differences. So if you want to support something from an environmental standpoint, and some people do, some people, it's like, it's not my business to save the planet, and I don't know that the planet really needs saving anyway. But I think that the difference from a health outcome is very minimal. It really is. And that's, I wish it wasn't. I wish I could say, yes, grass finished is 10 times better than grain finished, and we should all do that. And, it would marry with sort of the environmental ideology, but the data doesn't so far support that. And I'm not going to sit there and just tell people something that's true, because it would otherwise exclude a lot of people from doing this. And the same thing can be said about people that are saying you must eat all these organ meats, and raw organ meats and brains and testicles and penises and, whatever, and buy my supplements, because the stuff that you don't like it. So you don't need to do that either. Honestly,
That was my next question.
yeah, I mean, again, the data is clear. I mean, I'm actually someone who tracks the data, and I don't really care one way or the other. If you like eating organs, go for it. Have fun. I mean, that's great. But again, what I see consistently, and probably what Eric Westman sees and Ken Berry sees, and most people that actually clinically treat these people, is it doesn't really seem to make a difference, as far as fixing people's health. It's really, it really just comes down to, you can eat hamburgers. You can go to Wendy's and eat hamburgers, and you're going to probably lose weight and probably fix your diabetes and probably improve your mental health. And provided you're not in there eating the Coca-Cola and the buns and the French fries and all that garbage. I like I said, that wouldn't be my main. I mean, some people that's their main diet. I mean, I think that's fine for those that want to do that. I think it's better to cook at home anyway. I think there's advantages to that. It's usually cheaper for most people, and it's just a better. I think it's better to be able to make your own food at home and not rely on going out to eat all the time, because there are some things. Surprisingly, these fast food places are pretty good about not actually putting canola oil or soybean oil or whatever with their hamburgers. They don't use it. It's a waste of money for them. They don't need it. The meat already has fat in it, so they don't do that. But if you go to even a steakhouse, or a lot of these places, they're cooking these things and steaks. They're using the oil they're putting down there might not be something that agrees with you. They're using sugar in a lot of the even some of the toppings, and so cooking at home, you know what you're getting, at least most of the time you do.
That's the benefit. One of the benefits of COVID is my husband and I both working at home, and he cooks and great chef. So he'd cook our steak or whatever we like to have at lunchtime at 2:00. And it's like, oh, this is great. Don't have to eat out at all. But I know some people go to In-N-Out Burger and get the Flying Dutchman or something. There's burger patties with cheese on top. And having the cheese part of it, cow dairy, is always harder for us to digest than having meat issues, digestion issues.
Yeah, dairy is an interesting one. I think that while some people do just fine with dairy and have no problem with it, there are a lot of people that really struggle with dairy for various reasons. And so, I just have to say, be cautious with it. I think there's people that find that it's very easy to overconsume. I think, particularly liquid dairy. I mean, you think about milks and creams, it's very easy to overconsume calories when they're in a liquid form. We're not really outside of being a baby. This is when we're designed to drink calories. And that's a period of rapid growth. I mean, we grow more rapidly during our infancy than any other time in our life. And so we need that high calorie, high nutrient food. But later in life, I mean, it's not that can you have a glass of milk once a day and not be a problem? Yeah, that's probably fine for most people. But I know as a kid, I'd drink a gallon of milk a day. I mean, I remember my dad would get mad because he'd come home from work, there'd be no milk. And so I was, when I was old enough, I was like, oh, you got to go to the store now and buy a gallon of milk, because I drank it all. And we know there's relationships between people that drink dairy and don't in height. And so we do know a lot, it shows for growth. But I think once you reach your adulthood, it can be a problem, concentrated, whatever it is, concentrated carbohydrates in the form of powders, flours, sugars, liquid fats, like creams and butters, and powdered protein powders. I mean, we're not designed to, think about it in the wild. How would you get a powder? I mean, it would take you a lot of extreme effort to get a powder. And why would you ever even want to do that? Just eating a whole food. Why would you powderize? Your teeth don't powderize food. I mean, you have to sit there and spend hours and hours to grind food to get a powder. And so what happens is, because our digestive system is not designed for powders, we're designed for whole foods and slow digestion and sitting in the stomach for 3 or 4 hours and breaking it down. When you hijack the system with powder, you kind of bypass the normal, slow, sequential sequence through our incretin hormones like GIP, GLP-1, which are found in different regions of the gut, and they get stimulated sort of simultaneously, and you end up with abnormal glucose, insulin, glucagon responses, and that can lead to problems for people.
What about the protein mimicking diet? I know is that what it's called when they do the eggs? Yeah, the fasted protein. Was it Maria Emmerich always talks about? And they have eggs and everything.
It's a protein modified modified fast. Yeah. Yes. So that's a low calorie, very highly concentrated protein diet. It can be with whole foods. It works to lose weight, but it's a short-term thing. People don't want to, you can't do that for a long period of time. So it's for like a quick fix for, I want to drop 10 pounds. Yeah, you can go on a protein sparing modified fast. You can just fast and, you'll get that. I mean, the nice thing about a protein sparing modified fast is that, and this is the point, you're eating adequate protein, you'll tend to hang on to more lean mass. This is one of the times, if you're in a caloric deficit, we know that two things are going to prevent you from losing muscle. One is getting enough protein, and number two is actually resistance training. So if you're going to diet, if you're going to fast, you're going to eat a little bit of calories, eat a lot of protein, and lift weights or do some kind of strength training. You're going to keep as much lean mass as possible that way.
So with disease reversal carnivore, how is it actually healing people? Is it because we're taking out the oxalate, the plant lectins, and all of that stuff, or how's meat so healing?
Well, I mean, I think there's two things. I think one is you're removing a lot of problematic foods, and I think, I don't care who you are, what diet you advocate. I don't think anyone is advocating for processed foods except for every corporation in America, which advertises that stuff, right? But no credible, health advocate is saying you should be eating cookies and candies and Doritos and junk. You get rid of that. That's a huge step. The problem is, many people have a really hard time moderating that, because you go to a dietitian and they say, well, you can have a little of this and a little of that, and no one can, and I shouldn't say no, but very few people can stick to that, consistently over time. So we have that issue. I think those foods are causing damage to our gut in various ways. It's leading to perhaps dysbiosis, which is, an abnormal microbial, flora. It's leading to probably abnormal permeability. So we normally have a very selective gut membrane for our gut, so we can selectively pick what things we absorb and not. Because you think about it, our gut is really the most active interface we have within our environment. Our skin, although it's, we say we're all covered in skin, but our skin is designed to keep everything out. It's waterproof. I mean, it's, it keeps everything out, whereas our gut is very permeable. And so a lot of things get into our body from our gut. And so when it's abnormal, a lot of things get in there that are problematic. And so this is where you start to develop an inflammatory response. You start to develop an autoimmune response. Additionally, and so those things can lead to a whole host of diseases. And then additionally, the nutritional thing. So nutritional deficiencies can show up in various ways. And so when we're on a diet that is, one, devoid of much nutrients, and then two, there are also these quote unquote things called anti-nutrients, which prevent the absorption. So we know things like lectins and phytates and oxalates and fiber to some degree prevents the absorption of a lot of different minerals, particularly. Like for instance, we hear so much about polyphenols, how wonderful they are, but polyphenols actually block the absorption of proteins and fats, which we need, which are essential nutrients. And these polyphenols really aren't. They're not essential. And I know they have, isolated, we can point to where they're beneficial in certain situations, but in the overall picture, maybe they're providing some benefit, but at the same time, they're causing detriment. So is it a net positive or negative? It depends on the person. It depends on the situation, I think. But I mean, as far as, so I think meat, on a meat-only diet, you're removing all the garbage for sure. And then, the nutrition and the absorption of that nutrition is so much more superior. And, you just have this plenty of nutrition. You got what you need to heal things. You think about it, if I, like say I need to heal. So I use a trauma example. If I pull my muscle and, I tear some of the muscle fibers in my hamstring when I'm running sprints, right? So now I've got to heal that. And what's it going to take to heal that? Well, it's going to take supplies, and those supplies are basically, what are we made out of? We're made out of cells, and our cells are animal-based. We're not plant-based. We don't have, we have a membrane. We don't have a cell wall, and there's different, we don't have cellulose. We have cholesterol, and we have, animal fats and proteins, what we're made out of. We're not made out of carbohydrates. We're not made out of fiber. And so we're concentrating, giving that in a very concentrated form. It's just more efficient. Whereas, if you're trying to select that out through, broccoli doesn't have a lot of animal fat. It doesn't have any. It doesn't have a lot of, it has some protein, but it's harder to access, and so it's just more efficient for healing things. And whether it's a torn hamstring muscle or perhaps a sick, inflamed, damaged liver, all those cells need to be regenerated to a degree, and providing them with the nutrition that is just almost identical, in structure and in ratio and absorbability. Very good absorbability makes a big difference.
And so if you're not doing organ meat, it's okay to just eat strict animal protein, or do we need to add any nutrient supplementation?
I'll go back to, the observations of Vilmar Stefansson, who spent a dozen years living among the Inuit. And he basically said, look, you just need meat with enough fat, and that's it. The organ meats we threw to the dogs. I mean, that literally, he's on video in 1954 in an interview saying that's what we did. And these people have sustained for millennia. Now, are there people that eat organ meats? Are there, and a lot of people like to say, well, look at these, Hadza hunters, or these people living in the jungles or wherever, and they use those as sort of, well, they eat the whole animal. Well, of course they do, because otherwise they're starving. They don't have much food. They used to be in a situation where they had elephants and rhinos and big giant animals they could eat, and they had plenty of meat. And now they're literally scrounging around for baboons. And so they're like eating every last morsel of the animal. And I get it, not wanting to be wasteful, and it makes sense to me in respecting and honoring the animal. But do you need to do that to be healthy? I would say the answer is no, just because I've experienced it, I've done it, I've just seen so many people do it without that. And I do think, unfortunately, some of the people promoting it have a sort of financial gain to sort of push that message out there, particularly around selling supplements, which are doing well. They're making a lot of money doing that. But claim that that's somehow essential. I mean, even if, like you said, you could eat an egg. I mean, an egg has, if you think about a chicken is a mammal. It's an animal. Well, it's not a mammal. It's a bird, but it's an animal, and it has everything it needs to make a full bird. From birth from embryo to, chick, and it's all in the yolk. So everything that's in the yolk is going to be, what you're going to need largely. There's protein, there's fat, there's all kinds of vitamins and other nutrients. And so you can just add some eggs in there if you're really worried about it. But I literally have lived for a year or two on just straight red meat and nothing else, and no problems. Now, what do I do day to day now? Like now I'm eating basically steak and eggs in my diet. I mean, just because I enjoy it. And that's my variety, steak, the variety, I guess.
So I know I'm going to run out of time. So let's focus we have like 15 minutes to talk about how to put this all together for someone that's doing more endurance training, running, cycling, triathlons, and hopefully they do strength training. Cause I keep telling everyone you must lift weights to improve the aging process. And for the aging athlete, we really need to do that, especially females. So like say you're doing a morning cardio session, like a run, maybe do that fasted, and then like timing when to eat afterwards. Are you promoting fasted morning exercise would be, I guess, what I'm asking. And then how do you time when you eat based on your workouts?
Well, I mean, there's some physiologic facts that may influence your decision. So we know that, like, for instance, carbohydrates are absorbed and we have a glucose spike usually about 30 to 45 minutes after a carb heavy meal or carb isolated feeding. With protein, it's about 3 to 4 hours. Protein to fat, it might even be longer. It might be 8 hours before you see that, that little rise in glucose. And that may confer some sort of athletic advantage. So like, for instance, when I won the world championships in rowing, and granted, this was a sprint row, this is 500-meter row. So it's about a minute and a half event.
For you.
For me, yeah.
Like 3 minutes for me.
Right. So when I won that when I won the world championships, I literally had a 3-pound steak 3 hours before I went, because I knew that my protein would be bumped up then, and it worked fine. I think fasted cardio is fine. I mean, I don't, like I said, some people just don't like to eat in the morning, and particularly if you're going to go out for a run at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., it's not very convenient to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to eat a steak if you're doing that. So, I mean, it might make sense to do it that way. I think that, as far as, protein, again, we mentioned endurance athletes need a lot of protein. So you need to make sure,
like 1.0 gram, or like Dr. Leon says, or more.
I think a gram per pound is probably where you're going to be. I mean, if you listen to Don Layman, Stu Phillips, and those guys, they'll say 1.2 to 1.6 per kilo, which is about 0.8 per pound, or slightly less than that. But that's in someone who's also eating a decent amount of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates tend to be sparing for some of the other, because if you're not consuming carbohydrates, some of that amino acids are going to be shuttled into gluconeogenesis and not turned into structure. So you're going to have to eat more protein. So you're going to be, 1 gram per pound, I think, is a starting point if you're particularly on a strict carnivore diet. And many people find themselves much higher than that. For instance, I'm 245 pounds right now, and I probably routinely eat 300, sometimes 400 grams of protein a day. So I'm well above one per. I'm sometimes even as much as 1.5 to almost 2 per day. So the other thing is, the meal timing. Like I said, I mentioned, there might be a slight performance advantage with a big steak and eggs 3 hours before say if you had an event at 9 a.m. And you eat a meal at 6 a.m. or something like that, and a lot of people go to a race and they're, depending, a lot of them, those kick off around 9 typically, by the time you might show up at 8 and get issued all your stuff and, mill around a while, and line up. By the time you're actually performing, it's 9. So maybe a 6 a.m. steak and eggs meal would be good for something like that. I think, making sure, the other thing that's important with a carnivore diet or a low carb diet in general is that you are going to generally not hang on to as much fluid and electrolytes, just to the effect of the lower insulin that you'll be seeing. So, and a lot of people notice that when they eat a bunch of carbs, they just swell up, and they get puffy, some people. And it's because when you have lower insulin, your kidneys do not hang on to as much sodium and therefore water. They kind of follow each other around. And so when you're losing sodium and water, you just need to replace it. And so, like for me, for training, like I know if I'm going to do a workout where I anticipate it's going to be longer, I'm going to sweat. Like when I go to jiu-jitsu, I know I'm going to be soaked because I'm fighting for my life and I'm sweating like crazy. And so I take a pretty, like a 50-ounce glass of water, and I throw a little electrolyte replacement pack into that. And that works pretty well to keep me kind of performing well. You know, hydrated muscles do better, just like warm muscles do better. Hydrated muscles do better
Like
than
5 grams of sodium a day, or what kind of, I was listening to Rob Wolf on electrolytes. So
Yeah, I
the
mean
podcast
I
is,
mean if I were to guess what I consume, I would probably say I'm somewhere in that neighborhood. I don't, measure it
yeah,
out. I mean, I'm
that's
kind
what's
of
hard.
just intuitive, but I mean that's probably fair for most people. Again, different sizes, different
Yeah,
intensity, how much you sweat, if
it
you're in a hot
depends.
environment versus a cold environment, those things are all going to have an impact on that. So if you're constantly sweating and doing a lot of activity, you're going to probably need more, and if you're not, then you're going to probably need a little bit less. I mean, when we give up processed food, I mean, processed foods are so loaded with sodium. And I think the problem when they look at people's diets and they say, well, people eat a lot of sodium have more problems. Well, the problem is not the sodium, it's the processed food that's coming with it,
Yeah,
I think. And
I
so
agree.
it's just a marker for a bad quality diet. And so when you're eating a whole food diet, whether it's carnivore or something similar, you're probably going to have to get your sodium from somewhere else.
So the other question too, with exercise and timing your protein, you saying 3 hours before, but post workout, if it's cardio or strength, would you wait a little bit, or, what's
I
your
mean,
timing post workout for having a
so
meal?
yeah, I mean, again, the literature on this is mostly looking at protein powders and it's mostly looking at people on conventional diets and it's mostly looking at strength training where they show that, if you can get 30 grams of protein in you 2 hours before 2 hours after exercise, it's going to give you a slight advantage. It's probably such a slight advantage. It's probably not that big of a deal. The quote unquote anabolic window. People used to think I had to slam down a protein
Yeah.
shake plus carbs within 30 minutes, and it turns out that anabolic window is more like 48 hours. So, I mean, as long as you're consistently getting a decent amount of protein throughout the day, you're probably going to be, it's probably going to get you 98% of the way there. Now, if you were really like a bodybuilder and we're trying to just maximize every last little bit and squeeze out every little bit, you'd time it and you'd be eating your protein every 4 hours and that type of stuff. But I think for most people, it's even a lot of competitive athletes, particularly endurance athletes, probably unnecessary. And if it's not convenient for you to, immediately eat within 2 hours of your training, then I wouldn't worry too much about it.
So do you suggest like an upper limit of protein that we can break down at once? Like you were saying how you eat so much per day,
Right.
but for someone you hear like the 20 to 30 grams is all you can absorb and
Right.
use, or
Right.
is it up to 40 grams?
Right. So again, studies on this are done on protein
Shakes.
shakes, and those are absorbed in a very different way than say a steak would be. In fact, I asked Don Layman, who's regarded as one of the top guys in the world, about this. Is we just never do studies on steaks. We just don't have the money to do it, right? And the issue is because we know that protein powder, for instance, is absorbed very rapidly, and beyond 30 grams, and again you have to scale that for the size of the person. That would be the average size person. So a bigger person could probably handle 40 or 50 grams, and that's going to max out muscle protein synthesis. But there's other things that are going on for protein. That's not the only thing that protein does. Just our gut turnover, our daily gut turnover requires a ton of protein to meet our nutritional needs for that. So you're going to get some of that. But the point I'm trying to make about protein shakes versus a steak is a protein shake is absorbed very rapidly. So we have this rapid, uptake of these nutrients, all the amino acids, and then our body does metabolically, our liver converts some of it to ketones, some of it to glucose, and the rest becomes structural components. But with a steak, it's absorbed very, very slowly. I mean, you're just little by little, you're getting it. You're just getting this little slow, steady drips. You're not getting this huge bolus at one time. So, I mean, to think about it, if I could only eat 30 grams of protein, at one time, then I would be eating, a 3-ounce steak or something like that, a 3 or 4-ounce steak. And, I mean, maybe I could do that 3 times a day. I would starve to death. I mean, humans would have starved to death if we would have never been able to do it. Can you imagine ancient man walking around with little Tupperware containers containing exactly, little 3-ounce servings, and I'm going to eat
Yeah.
those once every, 3 or 4
Every
hours.
hour.
Not how we're designed as a species. And so meat is just digested in a very slow fashion. That's by design. And the reason we do that is because we extract everything from it. If we look at like studies with patients with ileostomies where they've lost their colon and they're just defecating into a bag, basically. When we look at that, all the protein, all the meat is gone. It's gone by the time it hits the ileocecal valve. At the end of the small intestine, it's completely absorbed. What's not absorbed vegetables, fiber. Those people will tell you, without exception, every time I eat a bunch of vegetables, it all ends up in the bag. None of it gets absorbed. So uh, it's just a slow, and protein powder wouldn't come out either. It's absorbed very, very rapidly up in the higher small intestine just because it's already particleized. And so I wouldn't worry about that, 30 grams at one time. I would just worry about overall in a day, am I getting enough? Am I getting that 100 grams or 120 or 150 grams or 200 grams, depending on your size? That would be my bigger concern.
Yeah, most people are not. I'm all about people's protein macros and how are you getting it in your window? Because I think people got stuck on this OMAD and doing just this 20-hour fasting window. I'm like, you are an athlete. You can't just eat all your nutrition in a short one
Yeah,
meal
it's
or
really
4-hour
tough.
window.
It's really tough. I mean, for me, I need to take in 4,000 calories a day just to maintain my weight and basic activity level. And for me to do that in one meal, I mean, I can do it, and I've done it before, but I don't enjoy it. I can, after I get through about 2 pounds of meat, I'm like, the next 2 pounds is going to be like, I'm not even enjoying this, so why bother? So it's
Yeah.
just easier to do 2 meals for me and probably most people.
Yeah. And last question, probably we can fit in, but a lot of people probably afraid of not getting enough muscle glycogen refueled. And
Yeah.
do they need to do a carb refeed at night? If they're working out, are we doing gluconeogenesis, depleting our protein to replace the carbs, glycogen in our muscles? What do we
Right,
want to
right.
tell
Well,
people?
I think that and there's a lot that we can go into discussion, but the
Yeah,
short
that's
answer is,
like
if
5
you are
minutes.
taking in adequate protein, because there's constant protein turnover, and some of that goes into structure, some of it goes into energy. But if you're providing your body plenty of protein, you are going to, for the most part, meet your glycolytic needs. You're going to restore your glycogen to a level where you can perform at a very high level. The exception of that would be, like I said, there's some people that would do like maybe some high-level CrossFit athletes where they are literally doing 3 workouts a day, and they just can't keep up with that pace, and they may need some amount of external source of glucose to provide it. But for the most person, like if you're somebody that you do one run a day, which is probably 99% of the athletes, you're fine. Just making sure you get enough there. Now, there's an adaptation period it takes. And so if you switch from a high carb diet to a carnivore diet, you may see a definite decline in performance for a month, 2 months, 3 months, even as much as 6 months. Some athletes take to fully convert. And the question is it worth it? Are the benefits outweighing the negative for you? And do you want to stick that out? So for the answer, for some people it's no. For some people it's definitely. But yeah, you definitely can meet that. But your body does upregulate its efficiency towards gluconeogenesis. You get more effective at burning fat. And so what happens, moderate exercise where previously you might have been using a little glucose to do even moderate exercise. Now you're not. You're just using all fat. And it's not until you get into the higher threshold training that you start to tap into the glycogen. So you're probably utilizing less glycogen than you would have before as well. And so it's not just, maximize my glycogen so I can go really hard using glycogen when you become more and more fat adapted. I know that sort of that little quote unquote fat adapted, you do just get better. I mean, I know, for instance, I've done extremely, extremely hard workouts with a blood glucose of 65, and I'm like, okay, well, and I'm using muscle triglycerides and probably some of the stored glycogen is still in there. But, there's a point where you get so effective at using fat, you only need glucose for that very small amount, or at least a predominant amount of glucose for that small amount.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think it depends to your workout. Say, like, often I work out some cardio in the morning if it's walk and yoga. Some days I bike or I run, but then I swim masters at lunchtime and then I lift weights in the evening. I don't have kids, so I
Mhm.
have just a few different workouts. Some of them are harder than others, but it's just, being able to time your nutrition for someone that's doing a 2-day workout that is leaving enough time to, if I have, say, meet at 10 in the morning, and then I'm swimming at 12 o'clock, doesn't always work. Sometimes I've been, trying to do more bone broth, or if, I like to do the protein shakes lately. The Keon has a great whey, and then I put colostrum in it that Keon has and glutamine and kind of make it a gut drink. I just can't eat a solid steak, but I'll try.
Well, I mean, and it's some people, yeah, and some people they can't do it. I mean, I know that we've got a lot of, particularly in the females, that have just kind of been so off put by red meat for so many years, or, it's not considered ladylike for whatever reason. And it's just kind of goofy, but my partner, my girlfriend who, when I met her, she was basically a recovering vegetarian, was just at that point, just starting to introduce some fish back into her diet. And it took me 5 years to get her to eat red meat. And now that's all she wants to eat. I mean, she's
Yeah, me
literally
too.
like savage. I can't get her to eat it medium rare. She's still wanting it too cooked for my for my steak snobbery. But yeah, I mean, it's a transition for sure. It takes a while, and there's no need to rush it. You can certainly just kind of work your way up to it.
Good. Well, I know we've taken up a lot of your time and I have a whole list of other things. I know we can also get tons of information on your website, and you have coaches and you have a great Q&A page on your website. Where do you want to send everyone to learn more if they want to do a carnivore diet plan with one of your coaches? How would you
Yep.
like
So
to go
we
about
uh,
sending?
we have a website. You can find it on at carnivore.diet. Carnivore.diet. That's a website. It goes into our Rivero platform, which is we're going to utilize that for more of a medical side of things. But if you just want information on carnivore diet, go to carnivore.diet, and it'll refer you to our Rivero page, which has the carnivore diet specific stuff. So
Now, is that like your new program? Is that more for medical health issues
So
with doing
Rivera,
carnivore?
we're still in the process of building that out. We've got to hire some physicians, and we've got to finish building out some of the software and some of the app stuff that's going to go with that. So that's still kind of in process. So the carnivore diet is what we've had for the last 2 years. So carnivore.diet basically is what we've been doing for the last couple of years. So that's a wonderful. It's probably the most. Well, it is. It's got the most resources of any carnivore thing you can find. So we have a
Yeah.
great community. We have all kinds of support, tons of information, research articles where you can find ranchers to get meat discounts on products, doctors that are low carb, keto, carnivore
Wow.
friendly. All those types of things are great for our people that sign up for our group. So
Now
anyway,
you're speaking at KetoCon or any conferences this
yeah,
year?
I'm at KetoCon in Austin
July.
in July, I think, is where I'm
Yep,
going to
6th,
be.
7th, 8th. I'll be there.
Well, I'll have to say hi then. Good, awesome.
Good. Yeah, there's a big lineup coming. So hopefully everyone comes to KetoCon, because I know I went to Paleo FX sadly a couple weeks ago at the poor conference. Didn't have anybody
Oh, it did.
there
Yeah, I
because
didn't. I
of,
don't know. Maybe they were down a little bit. I know they got burned a couple of years ago with the COVID thing and
well,
having
now
to
there's
cancel.
another racism issue. So a lot of everyone canceled speaking. So there's like nobody
I don't
there.
know. I don't know. I just I try to just
Stay out of it.
I try to stay out of that stuff and just kind
Yeah.
of trying to get people healthy. So interesting.
Well, thank you so much for everything you're doing. You're inspiration to all of us, and keep learning and trying to, be healthy from the inside out to improve the aging process. Research and I think, getting real food in our whole foods in our diet is better than any of the processed foods, as you said. So thank you so
Yeah,
much.
absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right.